Okay, more Julian Assange discussion with regards to the UN working group ruling opinion that he is detained arbitrarily. I want to just quick run through passing some comments over a NEWSNIGHT interview with I think his name is Mr. Ajobi, but it's difficult to hear and understand the spelling, but one of the panel members in the formulation of the opinion. And scrutinise it. At first I thought my very first impressions was that the UN person gave a poor performance, came over badly, gave a bad impression. But the more I watch it, the more I understand that actually it was actually quite a good performance, especially given, I don't know, given the circumstances. Live television interview, it's so easy to think better thoughts in retrospect, and it's probably the impression, I have to say, and if this is true, and I can't even say whether it is true or not, is partially governed by his nationality, and I am the most anti-racist person out there, but there's a natural inclination to dislike what is a different way of speaking English, whether it's more it's evident that it's of African origins and the broken nature, and this is operating at a superficial level, and I'm very heavily critical of myself on reflection and reviewing it and listening to the answers more carefully. How it's the juxtaposition of a smug, self-assured interviewer posing questions in a very cocky, pernicious way that leads to this, that also feeds into this negativity of his performance, and he is essentially hugely prejudicial as well. So before I go into it, I've had interactions with the YouTuber in Mendham, and just recently on Facebook with a gentleman, and I've come to realise that one way people very often cling to the gut emotive reactions and the need to rationalise their own correct moral standing in a position is to, as I made a video elaborating, pin their hopes on a definition and not understand that all definitions are in some sense arbitrary, or at least very definitely arbitrary in the meaning you ascribe to them or the importance you ascribe to them in that circumstance. It's a complicated idea. in the Facebook interaction, there's a gentleman insisting that Julian Assange was not under house arrest. Now, given that the mandate, the clear mandate of the working group and US international law is to consider any form of detainment, under this umbrella, the mere insertion of the phrase Julian Assange under house arrest can be interchanged with effectively detained, or effectively under house arrest, or de facto house arrest, or has his liberties removed from him. All these are the meanings that the phrase house arrest is meant to point to, but those clinging to the gut reaction always find themselves, how am I wrong? No, clearly, and they will say house arrest is this, and not understanding that the words was merely pointers in that instance to broader meanings which are difficult to encompass in a single definition. And so the interview begins with Mr. Ajobi being scrutinised over the definition of detainment. And he begins prejudicially saying that we can't discuss the concept of arbitrary before the concept of detainment, which is in itself an arbitrary judgment. So I'll start the video. Sorry it's so long to get into this. But I think it's useful to talk about the ideas you're going to talk about in readiness.
Mr. Ajobi, there are two words here. We can't really begin to unpick what arbitrarily means until we're clear on what detained means.
Now, I think the interviewer, the interview was longer than this minute or so that's been uploaded. It's 4 minutes. The interviewer seems oblivious, or at least the questions are oblivious to the content of the judgment, which in relevance terms, Mr. Ajobi is here to comment on his judgment, on the judgment.
Julian Assange presented himself at the Ecuadorian embassy of his own volition and could walk out of the door at any time. How is he being detained?
Well, in the report, it's agreed that he's not under his own volition, strictly speaking. So that so that could be questioned here straight away, and the fact that he's injecting the word detained here with the seeming presupposition as that detained means shackles and behind bars and hands-on arrest, leading to that such confinement. No, the UN mandate is to look at all forms of detention.
In the view of the working group, as it has been explained in the opinion, there is a continuity between the time he was arrested in 2010 and spent 10 days in detention and the time he was under bail under house arrest. That continuity led to when he is in the embassy. And if he leaves the embassy, he will continue in the deprivation of liberty. So that's why we consider that his stay in the embassy is still a detention time.
So
So I think Mr. Ajobi partially gave a relevant answer, but the important thing was to reject the notion, I think, of his own volition being at play here.
deprivation of liberty as represented by what you describe as house arrest is a fairly normal implementation of British bail conditions. Are you suggesting that everybody on bail in Britain who is required to remain at a certain address, or at least to live at a certain address, and present themselves to a police station is somehow under house arrest?
There is no basis for that conclusion. There is no basis for the question. There's just not. If you read the report, as Mr. Ajobi will say, I'm looking at the details under the broad scope of his human rights, and it is a fact of the case that he has had these liberties removed from him, and he has, to that extent, he was in a form of detention. The aim of the house arrest, whether it's conditions of a bail, are irrelevant to the question. That is weighing on Julian Assange's circumstances.
In our view, in this case, yes, it's
But what is different between this case and every other case of bail?
I mean, another absurd question, as though he hasn't read the opinion, as though he knows nothing about the 5-year history and facts of the case. There is a world of difference. Are you telling me that, you know, I'd like to rebuff him and say, are you telling me you come here to question me and you have no idea about the differences between the Assange case and say somebody remanded for 6 months on house arrest waiting for his court appearance, or somebody waiting 12 months? He will state very clearly that if somebody remained under bail conditions and the government failed to act and resolve the situation for 10 years, would it not have been the very time period that that became an absurdity and reflected? It wouldn't matter whether it was a judge-issued condition of bail. What has come to play is the time period in the context of what he did. Yeah. If he was the mastermind of the Holocaust, yeah, the Jewish Holocaust, and single figurehead implementer of that Holocaust, you couldn't justify not getting round to put him in on trial after a certain period. You couldn't just hold him indefinitely. This is the principle.
We were not seized of every other bail case. We were seized of Assange case, and in this case we consider that it was a detention period, and it's a constant jurisprudence for the working group that if you are under house arrest, it's a time of detention.
Yes, but
we can
what you
assess
describe
and
as
find
house
out
arrest,
whether it's
bail
it's
conditions.
You see, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about the clinging to, but it's not house arrest, it's bail conditions. Or, you know, it's getting hung up on this word and thinking you can win, and under pressure of one-on-one live interview, it's very difficult to extract these questions at issue and scrutinize them for relevance. It's arbitrary to start getting hung up on this. It's not house arrest, it's bail conditions, and to try to pull apart the aggregate informed decision and opinion on the whole context and the whole details and facts of the case by picking at words.
What you describe as house arrest was bail.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, loud and clear. How is house arrest bail?
It's you know, I feel empathy here. He's like thinking, what is this? You know, I mean, the nature of the UK's media, so-called interviews and questions, as compared to the nature and respect and the tone of the questions that are put on the UN, you know, addressing of the opinion is completely different, and it's a travesty that this can happen.
How is bail house arrest?
See,
that's what we have in the fact presented to us in the adversary process, where the government was also part, and that's what we concluded.
And the reason why he would face arrest and a return to the conditions of his bail if he were to leave the Ecuadorian embassy is that Swedish prosecutors are keen to talk.
I'm guessing here, but I imagine that there is no concept in UK legal law of house arrest. This is just a lay term which is bandied about as to convey the conditions of his bail.
Him about an allegation of rape that has been brought against him. So how does that play in?
And that is, I've criticised, you know, the blunt putting forward of this this allegation of a rape to a UK audience should be qualified by its the very broad definition of rape as per the Swedish definition. I think the UK audience is of the mind that surely it can't be so different, but that would be a wrong assumption.
To your judgment, the fact that he would be somehow deprived of his liberty because authorities want to talk to him about a very real allegation of rape?
Again, prejudicial speaking in terms of the Assange case, because this extra descriptor of a real case of accusation of rape, as if there are unreal accusations, is just out of order.
How does it play in your understanding? Does that?
I like that. How does it play in your understanding? It's just total bewilderment at this guy, at the illogic really that's going on in this interview.
They have to talk to him only when they arrest him.
They can't
Why
arrest him until he
over
leaves
5
the
years
embassy.
of investigation? Why over 5 years of investigation they have not been able to come to a conclusion as to whether he should be charged or not?
Well, because he won't go to Sweden, and when they try to extradite him,
you know, it's just totally not operating at the level of the opinion. It's trying to give the veneer of credibility to the anti-Assange position, if you like, by picking at the minutiae, which is really irrelevant in the broader context. He's had his liberty deprived of him for 5 years, and when you there is criticism abound on the Swedish governance, the credibility of this rape accusation. There's been changes in UK law because of the lack of weight in this kind of allegation. Yeah, the facts of the case that I know, or at least the contrary opinion, is that these ladies did not even instigate accusations of rape. The instigation of this was mere inquiry about and a worry about STDs.
He sought asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy, which is normally an action undertaken to avoid persecution, not prosecution.
Well, this again is prejudicial. He has taken refuge to avoid persecution. Again, this is a blatant disregard, prejudicial disregard of the facts.
What you might not want to understand.
The media want to play out the story that he's running from the rape accusation.
Here is that the lack of due diligence in the work of the prosecution. That's what the working group is criticizing.
Right, so it's a question of punctuality then, rather than legal principle that you're objecting to. They should have moved quicker.
This is phrased in a very derogatory way, as though it's a point that wins to trivialise Mr. Assange's arguments, but it's very far from trivial. A person being detained and having his liberties removed for 5 years, as will be emphasised by Mr. Ajobe.
It's a matter of timing, and the working group has made it very clear in the opinion we issue that 5 years of preliminary investigation without coming to a final conclusion, whether you charge the individual or not, to move to a trial is too long.
But how can they come to a final conclusion if they can't interview the only suspect?
He's already addressed this. That how does it play in your mind that the only way is for him to come out? Yeah.
Is the only way of interviewing the only suspect is to arrest him and take him to your country? Can he not be interviewed anywhere else, in your view?
Well, he has, of course, offered to be interviewed here by Swedish authorities, but when they acquiesced to that suggestion, he changed his mind. Are you not aware of that?
You smug bastard. You smug condescending bastard. This, again, is hugely prejudicial. Just, he changed his mind. Yeah. No, there were terms and there were conditions of understanding, and the long history and the facts of the case demonstrated to the UN group, and has been plain to see for all that the Swedish authorities, the prosecutor, did not want to do that. Yeah. Despite that it's happened 44 other times in the interluding time.
I'm not going to discuss those details because you and I, we are not part of the process. The fact we had before us showed that the Swedish prosecutor did not want to interview him in the embassy. And
so it's irrelevant, the question to him. He's here to talk about, and so it's a prejudicial question again. Yeah, well, the whole thing makes me mad, really mad.
Even the Swedish judge criticized the Swedish prosecutor for the same.
Okay, hell of a long video, sorry about that. took me so long to get through that short video. I hope it was of some value. Certainly valuable to me to get this idea and watch for this intense focusing in on a definition, and it helps you to understand when you sometimes hear an argument, oh, you're just talking semantics now, you know, this sometimes the semantics are important, sometimes they're not. I think the people who you've got to watch for that, when it's important, when it's not important, and watch for people who are with emotional bees in their bonnet, so to speak, operating from a gut instinct of moral correctness. When they start hanging up on a definition, I think you can usually be very sure that they're arguing semantics to give the facade, the appearance of winning an argumentative victory, rather than concentrating on what the words being used were pointing to in the broader context.